Unit 15, Population and Development. Contents: 15.1 Introduction, 15.2 Historical Background, 15.3 The Politics of Population Control, Environment and Gender, 15.4 India, the Population Experience and Developmental Concerns, 15.5 Conclusion, and 15.6 Further Reading. Learning Objectives. This unit will help you to explain Malthusian and Neo Malthusian perspectives on development, role of church and state on population control, politics of population control, and India's population experience and developmental concern. 15.1 Introduction. This unit seeks to outline the role of population and its relationship with development. Conventionally, in India, the study of population is understood to be the concern of demographers and at the most of government census officials who bring out the Census of India report once in 10 years. Population studies, however, is more than just keeping count of numbers or of births and deaths. It presents an overview of the socioeconomic conditions of society and is relevant in determining its course of social and economic development. The consensus is a mammoth exercise, a long drawn-out process of collecting data on the number of persons in India with an ensemble of informations on socio-economic status of the population. With every census, routine concerns have been raised and pronouncements are made over the issue of overpopulation, levels of poverty and unemployment, and social inequities. The significance and importance of population studies to the understanding of society as a whole. This is the social, economic, and political spheres of life, has attracted the interest of experts from various disciplines. Concomitantly, the study of population has been marked by controversies, conflicts, and opinion and long-standing debates on the desired course of development to the country. For long, a major global concern has been the overpopulation of the world. High population rates in the so-called developing countries, primarily Asian and African countries, it is argued, adds to the global crisis of providing for more persons from the limited and already overexploited natural resource base on Earth. There are various perspectives on the understanding of the global crisis and the issue of overpopulation. According to some experts, the hype associated with the role of overpopulation in aggravating the global crisis is overstated. The overemphasis of population as the cause of crisis, they argue, shift the focus from other structural reasons for over and wasteful utilization of natural resources by the advanced countries. In this context, the development debates gains significance and brings to light the politics around the population question. The present unit attempts to present some of the key issues that are central to the debate on population and development. The first section would present a historical background to the concern in population, the reasons for its inception, the issues that is raised, the politics that accompanied the same, and how the subject of population become an institutional concern on international crisis. The second section would delineate the substantive issues that emerge from what is popularly termed as population questions, on how population becomes a point of altercation and negotiation between the advanced and the so-called developing countries worlds over issues of development and the related environment and gender concerns. The third section would present the India's experience with population issues and development and the broad policy shifts of understanding the population crisis in the country. The conclusion would summarize the key issues raised in the different sections of the unit in relation to the debate on population and development. 15.2 Historical Background. Thomas Malthus' work essay on principle of population in 1798 is considered as the pioneering work on population, in which he explicated the fundamental theory of population growth. According to the theory, population grows at a much faster rate than what the natural resources can provide for. The number of people doubles even 25 years if unchecked, and thus grows at a geometric ratio of 1, 2, 4, 8, etc., while food production increases at an arithmetic rate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And given the limited natural resources base, there will be a shortage of food supply. This gap between the rates of increased population and food supply creates what he termed as positive conditions such as wars, famines, and epidemics that act as checks against overpopulation. He was against the use of birth control methods and abortion to check population. He suggested some preventive checks over overpopulation like prolonged celibacy and late marriage. Malthus proposed his theory at a time when Europe was experiencing a decline in death rate due to improvements in medicine and an overall industrial growth. Subsequently, there was a rapid growth of population in Europe by the spread of industry and acquisition of colonies accommodated the growing population. Moreover, between the years of 1800 to 1930, an estimated 400 million migrated from Europe to North America in search of better opportunities of work. Europe experienced depopulation rather than overpopulation. America was concerned about the rise in population largely because of the influx of migrants as well as the high rate of fertility among them. America came up with the strict immigration policies, which was resented by some European countries as it closed the door to greater economic opportunities. France was the first country to experience a fall in birth rate around 1800, and her low fertility rate was considered as one of the reasons for her defeat against Persia in 1870. Government efforts were made to deal with the problem in health. To suggest remedial action, the government introduced a number of measures to encourage large families. Family allowances were granted to assist wage earners with large families. In 1923, the law against abortion was amended to make it more effective. Other European countries too registered low birth rates, which led to a pro-natalist measures to keep the locals at home. In countries like Italy and Germany, for example, in Italy, strict laws against abortions and birth control measures and immigrations were introduced. In Nazi Germany, marriage loans were extended to couples to start families, a feature which was already placed in Italy and France. The pro-natalist measures related well as to the fascist and Nazi propaganda of the time and took on ethnic and racist hues. Considering of race and science led to the emergence of Eugenics, a political movement and a philosophy that dominated Europe in the early 12th century, particularly in Germany under Hitler. Eugenics is the selective breeding of the supposedly superior human genes to improve the quality of human race. Eugenics became the fundamental justification for the persecution of Jews in Germany and racial discrimination in general. Demographic considerations dominated many of the fears and consequent policy measures in Europe till the end of World War II. Population concerns became internationalized with the League of Nations between 1900 to 1940, taking up issues of birth control and immigration for discussion in its various forums. Advocates of Malthus' prophecy from countries such as France, Italy, Holland debated over the relationship between overpopulation and war. According to them, population pressure was the major reasons for international tensions and economic rivalry between countries as well as colonialism. Pro-natalistic movements were viewed as an expression of disgruntlement with the lack of access to economic resources, leading to racist and ethnic rivalries. The Neo Malthusians, in their various forms such as British Malthusian League 1990 and the 6th International Neo Malthusians and Birth Control Conference 1925, repeatedly pledged to restrict the birth rate so that people are able to live in comfort in their own country without feeling the need to expand their territorial base. The British Malthusian League adopted a resolution to deny the membership of any country that did not pledge to restrict its birth rate. The term Neo-Malthusianism was first used in 1877 by Dr. Samuel Van Houten, one of the vice presidents of the Malthusian League. Neo-Malthusianism was not just a campaign in favor of birth control, it was a particular perspective on the effects of populations on human conduct and behavior. Neo-Malthusian movements therefore was different from conventional Malthusian position on two counts. It stressed on birth control methods and also identified the working class with the problem of overpopulation. The overcrowded industrial slums were identified as sites of moral degeneration. This diverted the debate on population from issues of poverty and unequal access to resources to birth control per se. In fact, the assumption was that the access to commons or availability of resources would give the poor little reasons to abstain from having more children. Neo-Malthusianism thereby reinforced the ideology of private property, individualism, and capitalism. The Neo-Malthusian position found favor in the elite sentiments on the issues of overpopulation. The elite, threatened by the growing number of commoners, considered birth control as an important means of checking future conflicts over their property. The French delegates tried to maintain a stance of ambivalence through they were wary on contraception on the grounds that it encouraged the idea of seeking sexual pleasure without taking the responsibility of the consequences of the act. According to them, it devalued the institution and sanctity of marriage and family values. For the Catholic Church, birth control was illicit and immoral and went against the basic tenet of Christianity. Till the 1920s, most medical opinion was also against birth control as it considered it unhealthy and immoral. The attitude started changing subsequently as evidenced by the effort made by the British medical professionals in 1921 to appeal to the medical knowledge. Appeal to the Anglican Church to consider their position on birth control in the light of existing medical knowledge. In America too, after a court ruling in 1929 that upheld the right of doctors to prescribe contraceptives for health reasons, birth control was introduced in medical curricula. Birth control clinics were set up in different parts of Europe and America and marked the new phase of birth control movement. Birth control came to be popularized by taking recourse to the less offensive and more social terms like family planning or Planned Parenthood, and the emphasis was on spacing of children's and women's health. On its bids to control sexuality and domestic sphere of a person's life, birth control went against the modern values of individual freedom and the right of an individual to her or her privacy. On the other hand, it also questioned the orthodoxy of the times and presented birth control as an attempt to present a choice of individual to have a child or not. However, the source of birth control debate was not whether individual freedom should be protected or not, but on how to control overpopulation, population or underpopulation, and its consequent effects on the world. Central to the debate were the issues of migration, availability of labor, conflict over resources and property. The concerns were developmental and political. The erstwhile Soviet Union was the first country whose government attempted to make birth control advice and services freely available. Lenin, a key supporter of family planning, distinguished Neo-Malthusian propaganda from what termed as the freedom of dissemination of medical knowledge and the defense of elementary democratic rights of citizens of both sexes. The socialists consistently maintained that the hue and the cry over population was a way to divert the focus from the core issues of equality and class and struggle. For the sociologist, the real issue was unequal access to the resources, then rising population. According to them, there was enough for everyone, provided resources are shared equally. The problem lay in the lack of equal distribution, with the bourgeoisie and the trade class unwilling to give up the large number of resources under their control. After the World War II, situations altered, with a number of newly independent states joining the United States. By then, the Neo Malthusian demographic transition theory was well accepted. According to this theory, all countries pass through 4 stages of demographic revolution. The first phase is the pre-industrial stage, marked by the high birth and death rate and slow population growth. The second stage is characterized by population explosion with an improvement in technology and social conditions in life. The death rate is now low, but the birth rate remains high, leading to high population growth rate. The third stage makes the beginning of the decline of the birth rate due to socio-economic changes, and the fourth stage stabilizes this trend and establishes a slow and steady population growth rate. The interesting aspect of the theory is that the population growth was supposed to reflect the level of economic development of society. It established a low population rate as a key indicator of economically developed country. The post-colonies of the countries of the Third World stood out in terms of the Neo-Malthusian analysis. The countries that break oil of the duchess of the colonial rule seems to be undergoing the second stage of demographic transition. That is, they were experiencing high birth rate and low death rates, with better medical facility and infrequent famine conditions. Population had not only stabilized but also increased at a rapid rate. They were considered as backward, far behind the advanced societies in terms of economic development and technical growth, which was reflected in the persistent high rate of population growth rate. That these were a matter of concern for the developed world. Years of colonialism had left these countries poor, with a large population to provide for. Reduction of population became a priority with the UN. The focus was on the rising nutrition levels in developing countries and providing better health facilities to women and children. The proposal set up the Population Commission came up in 1945, which was opposed by the former USSR and Yugoslavia on the grounds that another commission would only confuse matters given the proliferation of international bodies within the UN. But the main reason for opposing the commission was because it focused primarily on population changes and the impending doom following the population exploitation rather than on the growth. It ignored the role of global capitalistic development in the production of economic backwardness in developing countries. The commission was nonetheless formally established in 1946. Although it had no decision-making power, it worked in collaboration with the other specialized agencies of the UN, such as International Labour Organization, Food and Agriculture Organization, and the World Health Organization. The Reflections and Action 15.1. What are the major differences between Malthusian and Neo Malthusian views on population growth and control? What has been the role of church in population control in Europe? 15.3. The politics of population control, environment and gender. As the discussion in the earlier section, scientific studies to evolve ways and techniques of engineering and demographic transitions in the developing world had been able to establish in the United States around the Second World War itself. The UN too had taken upon itself the task of encouraging third world countries to include birth control and family planning within its official responsibilities. The general perception was that the primary reason for underdevelopment and poverty in developing countries is overpopulation, in that whatever is produced is spent on feeding that many persons. This keeps the per capita income low and people are unable to come out of the situations of poverty. They live in unhygienic conditions, have no access to education, health facilities, and family planning techniques, and have more children with the hope that there would be more persons to labor and earn a living. According to Neo Malthusians, it is this vicious circle that perpetuates poverty, and the only way to cut through this mesh is by controlling overpopulation. This position is intolerant to the argument but forwarded by the third world countries that development is the best contraceptive. The idea being that with socio-economic development and consequent improvement in the standard of living, population rates will slow down. This, however, is unacceptable to the Neo-Malthusians on the premise that the world cannot afford to wait that long, given the alarming rate at which the population is growing. The impatience has also grown with the increasing awareness about the global ecological crisis. The ecologists have drawn attention to the limited carrying capacity of the earth and the limit to its resources, an idea central to Malthus' thesis. The ecological movement, which gained momentum over the last century, has consistently predicted doom in the near future if the earth continues to be overexploited at the present rate. For the Neo-Malthusians, this argument directly addressed the issue of overpopulation. This is the overexploitation of the earth in a direct consequences of the large number of people who feed on it. This argument, however, has been criticized for being simplistic and factually incorrect. The industrialized nations, which account for less than 25% of the world population, account for 75% of the world energy use and two-thirds of the greenhouse gases that emerge the ozone layer. The effects are global and affect everyone. Moreover, the third world countries have been used and dumping grounds of toxic and chemical produced by the multinational companies of the advanced countries in the third world. Thus, it seems that the sources of ecological crisis is not an overpopulation but overconsumption. The crisis lies in the fact that the rate of reproduction of nature is slower than the rate of industrial production. The Neo-Malthusian position on poverty and population also failed to explore the role and extent of structural inequalities of class and status, unequal access to the means of production, and the lack of structural reforms in the perpetuation of the conditions of poverty. The mechanization of the hitherto labor-intensive agriculture sector has accentuated class differences and hastened the marginalization of lower strata. In India, the Green Revolution, a movement to increase food production and to realize the goal of food self-sufficiency in the country, was achieved through technological upgradation of the methods of agriculture and introduction of high-yielding variety of hybrid seeds. The example is of interest more so because it was introduced to boost economic growth and agricultural production. Despite the immediate gains of the Green Revolution, it's triggered of a series of social, economic, and environmental complications. In the absence of land reformers, the commercialization of agriculture benefited the rich farmers and created conditions of indebtedness among the poor farmers. The poor farmers did not have as much land or the financial resources to benefit from the Green Revolution. Box 15.1, Myth and Fact. Myth: poor people will be better off if they had fewer children to feed and clothe. Fact: this depends on whether the children are an asset or a liability. In the US, for instance, the cost of supporting a child to the age of 18, excluding college fees, is over $1 billion. $100,000, and 50% of American women using contraceptions are doing so because they feel they cannot afford another child. But in countries of South, boys are already produced more than they consume by age of 10 and have repaid their parents' investment in their upbringing by the time they are 15. As for the environmental consequences, the use of pesticides, chemical fertilizers, and hybrid seeds have had a negative effect on soil quality. In fact, commercial agriculture and the overall utilization of groundwater has created conditions of drought all over India. The environmental crisis has put even the tried and tested route to develop of modern and advanced countries to questions. The construction of large dams, monoculture plantations, and commercial agriculture have not only created conditions of poverty but also questions the explicit faith in the dominant ideas of progress and development to bring about the appropriate demographic changes. The overexploitations of the environment but has put a large section of world populations at risk. Millions of persons have lost their livelihood, face severe health risks, and have been forced to migrate to the already overpopulated cities such as search of alternative employment. The indigenous peoples around the world, peoples across the world of tribes as they are known in India, have collectively campaigned against the destruction of their natural habitats, which has cut into their source of livelihood and forces them to migrate in search of an employment. Studies of fertility and poverty reveal the complex relationship between the poverty and the tendency to have more children. For one, unlike the Neo Malthusian belief, children are not viewed as liabilities but an assets. The motivations to have more children carries from the class to class. Landless laborers who depend on manual labor and the poor farmers who cannot afford mechanized alternatives to manual labor prefer to have more children. Overpopulation then is not the cause of poverty but perhaps or at the most a symptom. This is to say that having more children is not the reason for their improvisation, but it is calculated rational economic decisions on their part. According to the ILO statistics 1995, there are 250 million children in the age of 14 years working for a living, and 50% of them are employed full time. The World Development Report in 1984 further support this argument through its finding in Thailand, South Korea, Indonesia, and Turkey. Children here are considered as incentives, investments as persons who would take care of their parents in the future. This heavy reliance on children also demonstrate the absence of pure performance of other forms of institutional transport structures and welfare programs in the third world. Clearly a unidirectional focus on population cannot explain or cure poverty as its persistence in the third world. Box number 15.2, Myth and Fact. Myth: Muslims do not practice family planning because of their religion. Fact: Islam does not prohibit family planning. Several ulemas of different countries in fact have already issued fatwas saying that all temporary forms of family plannings for medical and economic reasons are permitted. In Islamic countries like Turkey and Indonesia, for instance, family planning methods are quite popular. In Turkey, 63% of the population uses contraception, and in Indonesia its figures to 48%. In Islam, prohibits abortions only after 120 days of conceiving, except to save mother's health. Another factor that needs to be discussed along with the issues of overpopulation is that simultaneous prevalence of high rate of infant mortality and fertility developing countries. As analysis of the reasons reveals, structural factors for the same, the low status of women, lack of proper nutrition, and personal family emerge as a common reasons for higher rate of infant mortality. Infant mortality only registered death of children in the first year of birth, while many of the children who do survive beyond the first year die due to the lack of proper nutrition and care. In a system dominated by patriarchal values which attaches greater value to a male child and recognize women primarily by their reproductive functions. The motivation for having many children is structural. In such a situation, women either lack the power to decide whether to have a child or not, or exercise their reproductive role in order to find acceptance in the system. Contraceptives or other techniques of birth control have been misused to control women's fertility. Thus, instead of providing women greater control over their reproductive functions, birth control techniques have provided a means of controlling women's bodies. The proliferations of illegal and private determinations clinics all over India is the case point. Female infanticides and terminations of pregnancy or to avoid having a girl child is a common practice. Similarly, in China, the resurgence of female infanticides and abandonment of children in the early 90s, 80s were attributed to the pressure created by government's family planning program. The fear is that the drop in the number of families will lead to other form of exploitative practices against women, such as a revival of infant betrothal and new forms of sexual and economic slavery. There is also a controversy over the politics of technology transfers from the first to third world. The concerns about populations and now HIV/AIDS has also been viewed as a circuitous means of creating a market, or rather dumping ground for many of the obsolete technologies of the first world, the nation worldwide. In such a scenario, it is good enough to control both and bring down the population. It is not important to address the ethical issues surrounding birth control techniques and the override to check overpopulation without dealing with the large structural dimensions of the problem. In order for family planning techniques and birth control measures to meaningful, social and economic conditions of women have to be improved by concentrating on women's reproductive roles. Women's productive lives is not considered in comprehending their compulsions and reproductive choices that they have. Reflections and actions 15.2. How does population control policy of the state affect women's status in society? 15.4 India, the population experience and developmental concerns. India was one of the first countries to recognize the population problem and adopt an official national program on family planning in 1952. Concern over the rise in population in India started well before independence. In the 1930s, between 1881 and 1931, India's population grew from 27.7 million to 279 million. And between 1931 to 1940, it grew from 279 million to 318 million. The rise was phenomenal, from 10% in the first decades to 14% in the second. This growth was unprecedented, primarily because of the measures taken to control epidemic and famine situations. The concern over the rise of population was more among social reformers, intellectuals, and the Congress Party than in the British government. The British government was cautious in raising the issue, as they had witnessed the reaction of people to birth control back in Britain, and also because they did not want to create conditions of unrest among the Indian over the issue. Most Congress workers under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi were against birth control measures. The use of contraceptives was considered sinful. It was seen as a method to offset the procreative role of sex. But many leaders, scholars and trainers of Indian civil service who had been to England and was acquainted with the Malthusian theory considered India as a likely casualty of the positive checks, wars, famine and epidemics. Due to overpopulation and poverty, the Neo Malthusian League was established in Madras, presently Chennai, as early as in 1929. The League brought out a propaganda journal titled the Madras Birth Control Bulletin. It was in Mumbai that the birth control was for the first time seen not as a means to control the population, but as a method of liberating women from the frequent and difficult task of childbearing, preventing unwanted pregnancies, and improving the health of women. Professor R.D. Karve in Mumbai made it his lifelong mission to campaign for the rights of women and educate people about birth control. He later became the member of the Family Planning Association of India, formed in 1949. In 1935, All India Women's Conference also took up the issue of birth control in the annual meeting held in Thiruvananthapuram and adopted a resolution to uphold birth control with the view to improve the status of women in society. The Bengal Famine, in which over 1.5 million people died, and the inquiry that followed brought to light the effect of a rising population on the economy and poverty. Similarly, the Bore Committee report of 1949 also related issues of public health, sanitation, and prevention from communicable disease with population control. Both the reports formed the foundation for the family planning program after independence and its inclusion into India's 5-year development plans. The first 5-year plan, 1951 to 56, stated its intention as follows: the reduction of birth rate to the extent necessary to stabilize the population at a level consistent with the requirement of the national economy. Clearly, the intention was not just to reduce population but also to stabilize population growth rate at a level that can be sustained by the national economy. But population control was pursued as an independent agenda, separate from the concerns of development and social change. No numerical targets or demographic goals were set in the first and the second plan. In 1959-69, and people were expected to go to the clinics and seek family planning and services. Besides providing the regular methods of birth control such as diaphragm, condoms, vaginal foam tablets, sterilization services were also provided. The third plan, 1961-66, replaced the clinic-oriented approach with an extension education approach, which aimed at taking the message of birth control to the people instead of waiting for them to approach the government clinic. The message to the people was to adopt the small family norm, which was not only a sensible choice in terms of giving their children a better future and improving the health of women, but also the need for building a healthy and prosperous country. The family planning program was officially made a part of the public health departments, and peripheral health workers such as auxiliary nurses and midwives were appointed in primary health centers to inform, motivate, and encourage villagers to adopt family planning methods. By fourth plan, 1969-74, targets for sterilizations were set and camps were held to operate on people to meet targets. Although 61% of the target was achieved, population growth increased at the same rate, which perplexed policymakers and administrators. It was in the fifth plan period in 1974-79 that the National Population Policy 1976 was formulated. Concerted effort was made to improve the organizational structure of the health department and increase its efficiency in achieving family planning goals. Government offices, villages, and urban centers were targeted for sterilization. Emergency that followed soon after, as per many analysts, brought out the uninhibited and obsessive side to this drive of bringing down the population. Emergency created a fear among people about forced sterilization, and the new elected Janata government changed its approach to pacify people's fear regarding birth control. It adopted the term family welfare instead of family planning to suggest a malleable character of the program. The concentration was now on educating people and thereby motivating them to adopt family welfare measures. A number of recommendations of 1976 policy were not the less adopted. For example, the age of marriage for boys and girls was raised to 21 and 18 respectively. The sixth plan, 80 to 85, set a long and short-term target which persisted through the seventh plan, 85 to 91. The long-term goals focused on reducing the size of the family, the birth, infant mortality, and death rates, while the short-term goals was to encourage sterilization, use of intra-uterine device, and other conventional contraceptives. The plan demonstrated time and again that enacting laws of or implementing birth control program was unable to deliver the desired result. The deeper analysis of the population puzzle reveals that the accompanying measures to reduce poverty levels, economic and social disparities in the country were not effectively translated into practice. Most remained on paper. The goal of employment for all, improving the quality of life of people by providing efficient and regular basic services of education, health and sanitation and water, and most importantly strengthening the capacity of people to procure these services without difficulty, are yet to be achieved. High population growth rate is found in the northern states of India in comparison to the rest of the country. Interestingly, Kerala, which is one of the states that has brought down its fertility rates, is still one of the most economically backward states in the country. The Kerala experience illustrates how economic growth is not the only important condition for population regulation. In fact, the caste of West Bengal, the other communist stronghold in the country, has not been able to achieve the success of Kerala, primarily due to the lack of attention given to female literacy. An analysis of states like Goa, Kerala and Tamil Nadu, which has registered as drop in population growth, demonstrates other supposedly extraneous reasons for the same. Goa, despite the strong presence of the church, has never been averse to the family planning propaganda. It has, like Kerala, always recorded high female literacy level. The age at marriage of women has been higher than the rest of India. Kerala, with a communist state in power for over 2 decades in state and a strong workers' movement, was able to direct economic and social change. Land reforms, regularization of minimum wages in agriculture and organized sector, and premium attention to primary and secondary education ensured social justice and reduction of poverty levels, and thereby created conditions for fertility regulations and decline in population growth. Tamil Nadu's experience reveals the role of a strong bureaucracy and political will in popularizing the family planning programs. Known for the self-respect movement spearheaded by Periyar in his strong radical views on caste, status of women and education, marriage and contraceptions in 1920s, the political and social climate was already set for implementing birth control programs. The bureaucracy in Tamil Nadu pioneered the family planning programs and developed a comprehensive maternal and child welfare programs in the state. The camp approach was also systematically institutionalized in the state. The program was also decentralized to the district level and was made a social responsibility of the district administrators. Components of teaching or awareness building, extension or instructions about contraceptive services and aftercare services to persons who undergo vasectomy was included in the program. Popular initiatives funded by international agencies like midday meals for over 9 million school children, which also generated employment for over 200,000 women in the villages, further helped in building a mass base for the program. Evidently, the supply chain services of fertility and population regulation have to be complemented by the principle of demand for these services. The demand or motivation of fertility regulation has to be created by concerned citizens, organizing and the government. Increasingly, it is clear that the target-oriented program of population control is narrow and does not address the larger social, political and economic issues that perpetuate conditions of poverty, literacy, illiteracy and ill health. Any policy framework for population control has to create favorable conditions for economic, social and political equity as well as environmental friendly economic growth. Bureaucratic efficiency and good governance are also at the heart of successful delivery system of health services. Unless this prolonged approach is adopted and implemented with the right earnest, containing population growth will be difficult. It is not impossible. The National Population Policy of India 1994 explicitly argues for a pro-poor, pro-nature and pro-women population program which views people as active partners in dealing with the population problem rather than in the source itself. Initiatives by the Indian government to decentralize the development concerns to the lowest level of administration and thereby involving elective representative of the village councils and non-governmental organization in implementing health programs as well as mainstreaming alternative medicine systems and health delivery systems within the government have been attempted to evolve a multi-pronged approach to population and development. The policy changes, however, have to supported by a strong political will and a sense of social responsibility. Reflections and Action 15.3. Select any two states in India. Collect data of these states of 91 to 2001 census on. First, population by rural, urban, male and female. Second, literacy by rural, urban, male, female. Third, work participation by rural, urban, male and female. Arrange this data in a tabular form and compare the co-relationship among these variables as emerged in the states, keeping the following questions in mind. What is the pattern of population growth in these states by gender? Is there a relationship between literacy and population growth? What is the relationship between work participation and population growth? 15.5 Conclusion. In this unit, the attempt is to move beyond statistics in understanding issues of population growth. The issues of population control has always been surrounded by controversies. The first section illustrates how the population debate at its inception was closely associated with the social and economic changes in the Western world. Religious orthodoxy, concerns of depopulation and availability of labor and overcrowding of urban centers and rising poverty plagued and the debates of population growth. The attempt is to demonstrate the importance of ideological positions in the adoption of particular strategies in dealing with the issues of population. The second section carries the debate further as it evolved after the Second World War between the advanced countries and the newly independent nations of the Third World. Overpopulation was identified as the main reason for the backwardness and poverty in the Third World. While the Third World believed that economic development could lead to a decline in the population rate, the same did not convince the advanced countries. The pressure to control population was mounted on the Third World, especially in the wake of the limit to growth thesis, which argued that the Earth would not be able to sustain the ever-growing population on her limited resource base for long. The section also examines the implications of population politics on women. The third section traces the broad policy orientations on population in India and presented case studies to understand the reason for the failure and success of the programs in different parts of the country. Analysis revealed the role of larger structural and social reforms and efficient government delivery system as the underlying reasons for their success. These cases have prompted a country-wide debate on population, and some of the issues have been included at least at the policy level. This unit traces the debate from its inceptions to the present with a view to address some of the issues that have been contributed to the growth and intensity all over the world as well as in India. 15.6 Further reading. Demographic Transition, the Third World Scenario. One book is there. Then Women, Population and Global Crisis, a Political Economic Analysis. Another book. And there is Population Policy for India, Perspective, Issues and Challenges. Another book. So this is the end of the chapter 15. Thank you very much.